Emergency room shutdowns continue in BC. Another earthquake in BC. The tariffs are scheduled to start tomorrow. And is media biased in Canada? And Chrystia Freeland was on Bill Maher. And Mark Carney responds to that lie accusation. All that and much more on The Really Big Show. With me, Ian Burns in Ottawa. Beautiful sunny day here in the Okanagan. You can see on our backdrop, our live shot, traffic flowing well and beautiful blue sky. How is it looking in Ottawa, Ian?
It's cloudy and minus 20-ish.
Wow, and you got a little bit of snow, I take it, still.
Yeah. Oh, they brought out the gigantic sort of tractors and whatnot to get some of the snow mountains off my street the other day. So we're starting to heal.
There you go. The valley floor here, bare, no snow on the valley floor. Still lots of snow in the mountains here. But let's get right into it. We got a really big show here. Welcome back to Monday. The work week begins. Emergency departments forced to shut down another 2 BC Interior hospitals, this time 100 Mile House and Merritt.
Yep, that's the 5th time, isn't it, in the last sort of week, I think, for Merritt. We interviewed the mayor of Merritt. He said he thinks this is going to keep happening for potentially years, he said. But that's not what the NDP has said. They said that they're going to, they're throwing everything, the kitchen sink at this, and they're going to fix it. But they've been saying that for some time now, haven't they? And these are two that are often affected, 100 Mile House and Merritt. The other ones, Williams Lake and Lillooet, they're often, yeah, Oliver's another one that gets really,
Oliver was the worst
has a really
last
bad
year.
time.
Oliver was the worst last year.
Yeah, and I think he actually said in that interview with Steve that it's like vacations, didn't he? And he thinks that the summer's going to be worst because that's when people go on their holidays. So, I mean, that's pretty unforgivable, I would say. It's, yeah, if you make a rota for your staff, then it really has to actually work, doesn't it? I mean, can you imagine a private company, a company like, I don't know, Google or something like that, when they do their rota of their staff, that they just have to shut down every now and then when people go on vacation? It's something that's so dysfunctional that it could only happen in the public sector, really.
Yeah, and this has been plaguing the interior of BC for quite a while now. So there is good stories on Kelowna now, including when the mayor of Merritt spoke out, I think that was 6-7 months ago, and then the recent interview with him as well. It's on Kelowna now. He's quite upset about the whole thing, as well he should be. Another earthquake shakes awake some British Columbians, and this is a 4.1 magnitude earthquake detected around 5 p.m. or 5 a.m., roughly 44 kilometers northeast of Victoria and 75 kilometers southeast of Vancouver. It isn't believed to cause any damage.
Yeah, that's what you get for living in the Ring of Fire on the tectonic plate.
Yeah, we've had a few in the last little while too.
It's also been blamed. It's been blamed on fossil fuels, hasn't it, as well recently on fracking, because there's a small chance of like kicking off a very small earthquake every now and then when you frack. So it's been used to complain about LNG or natural gas mining or whatever you want to call it.
Never let a disaster go to waste.
No, if you can, and especially if you can associate it in people's minds with naturally occurring phenomena like earthquakes or wildfires. If you can do that, then Bob's your uncle. You might just have won the argument.
And then the throne speech goes tomorrow here in BC at the same time the tariffs are supposed to kick in. Brenda Bailey, the finance minister, is supposed to deliver that speech.
Yeah, and they're blaming it all on Trump, but you don't have to have been around long to know that the BC economy, and particularly the BC fiscal situation, has been quite bleak for quite a number of years. And that's the reason that this is a difficult economic time for British Columbia. Not so much the threat of the Trump tariffs, because as David Eby and his lieutenants repeatedly say, BC is actually in the best position of all the provinces in Canada to weather this. It is the least reliant on US trade, and also obviously has the best port in Canada, has the best access to East Asia and the Pacific, like the fastest growing economies in the world. It has that sort of advantage, but the real trouble for BC is that it has the fiscal situation in BC is just catastrophic. It's really really bad. It's a lot of a huge deficits being recorded year after year, and it's you can't do that.
And that's been happening before Trump, and that budget deficit was forecast in at $9.4 billion this fiscal year. But David Eby did make a declaration of economic war because of Trump, and that's the reason they say they pulled that $1,000 grocery rebate. He said it was because of the Canadian dollar, and also that investment capital is fleeing Canada and British Columbia. Both of those things were happening prior to any Trump tariff threats, though. So looks like they were just looking for an excuse to stop that $1,000 grocery rebate that they promised everybody when they were trying to win that election.
Yeah, and I think that there's a possibility that might hang over their heads a little bit, going forward. There is a very realistic prospect that this government might fall. It does have a very, very thin majority. I mean, I know they have the Greens to back them up, but that's not necessarily a guaranteed relationship. So it's possible that they might have to go into an election sooner than they would have expected, and I think this is going to hang over their head. I mean, it is a big deal, that, isn't it? You promise everybody $1,000 if they vote for you, just like straight up quid pro quo there. Your vote, and then you vote for me, I give you $1,000, and then to win the election, and then to not stump up that $1,000. People remember stuff like that. That's going to linger in people's minds. So they might think that they've got away with it now, but I don't know. I think this is going to really stick to them for a long time.
I think the bigger problem is the reasons that they gave for not giving the money out. One, they delayed opening legislature, right, till into February, which they could have had a fall session. They avoided the fall session where they could have delivered that. There was no Trump threats at that time. And then the two excuses they gave for it don't make sense either, because the dollar had already fallen and it was actually recovering when they said that thing. And the investment capital has been fleeing Canada and the province for over 3 years.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, they said there wasn't the kind of economic stability, or necessarily the fiscal headroom to throw out those $1,000 checks to people, but there was enough stability and fiscal headroom to give every single MLA in the party a sinecure, a pointless promotion to a job that doesn't really exist, so that they could get more money.
Yeah, they all got more money. There was no pullback on that, and no even remorse on that, and taking that away when they took the $1,000 away, and nobody said, "Hey, I won't take that check." They all took it. And but in some of the good news, Jock Finlayson, the chief economist for the Independent Contractors and Business Association, said maybe they're going to listen now. Maybe they're going to actually see something happen in our national resource industries and our trade exposed industries, such as manufacturing. So maybe they're going to actually be open to the ideas of strengthening our economy.
Yeah, well, maybe. Let's hope so. But like, a lot of people are making this sort of noise, aren't they? Across Canada and also in Europe. There's a lot of noise specifically about manufacturing and obviously defense as well. But where's the evidence? It's one thing to say you're going to do something, but it's another thing to actually do it. And we still haven't seen that happen. So let's wait and see.
And this next story is a story from Blacklocks. You can subscribe to Blacklocks. You go to Blacklocks, search them, and Holly Doan. And it says the public is alert to media bias. And that's from the CRTC researchers. The public said media typically do a poor job of reporting on different political views. And you say that all the time, that our national media definitely has a bias leaning towards the Liberals.
100%, or just progressivism in general, not necessarily, progressive ideas in general are given They're almost treated as a default. I think that's a way to look at it, because the people that write the news, the journalists, have almost an embarrassingly homogenous set of political views. They all basically believe the same things. They all went to university together. They all have very similar life experiences. You know, there aren't very, put it this way, there aren't very many journalists who grew up in like northwestern Alberta and worked in some kind of natural resources sector for like 15 years and then became a journalist. That just doesn't really happen. You might be able to find a few exceptions, but they're kids from middle class families who grew up in the suburbs, went to university to do a humanities degree, and when they did that degree, they were taught by professors who are all left wing and progressive, and they were taught lots of left wing progressive ideas, and then they became journalists, and now they write the news. I can't believe, I mean, you can't be surprised that they're all basically progressives. And that is just that's the prism through which they see the world. And that's why it's all, you know, biased, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it also this Blacklock's article also talks a little bit about social media, doesn't it? And that which really has kind of that has changed things, and that it's diminished the value of the traditional press, and it's elevated people who aren't even journalists, like Joe Rogan and people like that. They're just random people on random YouTubers who are trusted more than the press. So there's been a consequence to that kind of
And we saw that big
consensus of
time.
view.
We saw that big time in during the U.S. election. We're even seeing it here when we're going to talk about it later, where Chrystia Freeland goes on shows like Bill Maher and Mark Carney goes on with Jon Stewart. So they're all reaching out to these different bigger outlets. Jordan Peterson did that interview with Pierre Poilievre. So people are turning towards other sources of media, and a lot of it has to do with their discontent with the way that media is pushing certain narratives sometimes.
Yeah, but also like the likes of Chrystia Freeland. In some ways, it's like, why does she even need to go on a CBC? Like to an extent, or why do liberals even need to bother to go on CBC? Everybody that just about, the majority of the listeners to CBC or viewers are already liberals anyway. Like so, there's not many people to persuade. Whereas she goes on Bill Maher, and she might get some more independent thinkers because Bill Maher tries to project himself. He tries to represent himself as being like a no nonsense, middle of the road kind of guy, and he does have a lot of people on the right that like him. So I guess she thinks that's more of a kind of neutral platform. But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that I would say that going to foreign news, especially when and one of I'm not sure. No, actually, it was the Bill Maher one where she started to talk about how important it is for Canada to protect its culture and protect its media ecosystem. I'm just thinking, if you really believe that, why are you on American TV? Isn't that the enemy? What are you doing?
Yeah. And more on CBC. Here's Melanie Jolie coming out and said that we have to rely on the CBC to save Canada. And this is after Pascal Saint-Onge said that we need to double the funding for CBC. And she says that Canada has basically three main pillars to have a strong democracy, and the legislative branch, the courts, and the media. And she said we already have two really strong pillars, and then we just need to strengthen the CBC to have a really strong media. And I'd like to remind her that Bill C-18 is basically crippling most media outlets in Canada, other than the ones they selectively decide to fund. Canada is one of the only Western nations that has blocked Meta, or Bill C-18 has forced Meta to block news outlets from posting on social media. But it's not going to stop the Liberals from advertising on Meta at the same time.
Yeah, and using taxpayers' money to do it as well, and as they advertise through the federal government. But I mean, I would just have to say briefly, Melanie Jolie is, she's an educated woman. I believe she even went to Oxford University, quite a famous university where you get supposedly get quite a good education. And she's saying that there are three branches to the Canadian government: legislative, judicial, and media. I mean, what about the executive? I would say that you learn that probably when when you're about 12, maybe 13 years old. You don't need to go to Oxford University to know that the three branches of the government are legislative, judicial, and executive.
Yeah,
And
I never knew the media was part of that. Do you know what I mean? The media should be holding power
it
accountable, not
I
being
mean,
part of
it's actually
government.
quite an astonishing misunderstanding on her part. She's a minister of, what is she a minister of? The Crown. What's the Crown? That's the executive. I think maybe, just like me, she should sit down and do the citizenship test, because you have to learn all about this. There are people from, Somalia and Iran and Russia and all around the world who come to Canada and they have to do the citizenship test. They would be able to educate this minister of the Crown about what the real nature of the Canadian government is. I just think, things like this. How can you look at people like this with respect when they make such stupid mistakes as this? It's a struggle. It's a real struggle to get through these stories sometimes when they say things this stupid.
And I would ask people to pull the stock chart up of Chorus, which is global, Post Media, Glacier Media, and a bunch of others. And then the stories that we've done on it. 400 outlets have closed during the last little bit here, like 10, 15 years. And Bill C-18 has crippled traffic on most media outlets. And the ones that get funded by the government don't really care about that. But the ones that rely on that traffic definitely care. And we're going to lose 3 more here in British Columbia here in May. They've said they're going to close both online and their publications. And then, the thing that's tough to swallow is how they say that like supporting a strong media is important. They should just say the truth. Supporting CBC as the only voice in Canada is what they're really after. And then when she says that it's part of government, maybe she's saying the truth there in her mind.
Yeah, you could argue that that's a little bit of a kind of accidental admission, that, isn't it? Because the media that they support, I mean, there's a token support that, there is a token non-progressive media conglomerate that is funded by the government, and that's the Post Media, which is, pretty small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. I know they're
And
quite
I'll,
popular and they do quite well for themselves in their own way, but they're not really a significant presence in the Canadian media landscape, are they? But other than them, it's all progressive outlets, and it's even when you look at things like the Local Journalism Initiative. That's not many people know about the Local Journalism Initiative, but that's another sort of funding scheme for the media. And I check that every day. I look through it, being the editor of our platform. I look through it to see if there's anything interesting on there. And I would say 95% of the stories are left-wing, progressive, liberal, left. Some of them even to the extent that, they talk about things like climate change. And, I would say that they would make Greta Thunberg blush, some of those stories. That's what's being funded by the Canadian taxpayer. So I suppose in that sense, yeah, that's kind of rightly, maybe she's correct in that sense, Jolie, to perceive that as a branch of the Canadian government, because they certainly prop up the Liberal Party and the ideas of the Liberal Party, and also the NDP.
Yeah, and let's move on to the Liberal leadership race. And just also, we definitely welcome comments, and we're watching the comments and that on our YouTube and TikTok and that. So if you have some comments, that'd be great. In the Liberal leadership race here, Chrystia Freeland went on Bill Maher. We're going to listen to this clip here.
So Justin Trudeau, who's on his way out, used to be very popular. I mean, he still has his fans, 3. And they may be asking, why did you turn on him? Because, you were part of his government. What was it? And also, what would you do differently? And if you watch the election here, don't ever say, nothing comes to mind. That's the bad answer to that one. What would you do differently?
Well, with the Prime Minister, I think every politician has their sell-by date, and that's part of what happened. But I think the other thing that happened is my party, we're actually called the Liberal Party, and I am an old school Liberal. And Liberals in Canada win when we are focused on people and on what they need in their lives. And we lose when people think that we're focused on virtue signaling and identity politics.
So the same thing that sunk the party here in America when they went too far left. And that's the impression I got from Justin Trudeau. Why did he go and become one of those elitist type of scolds who looked like he was just overbearing, that sort of left-wing overbearingness?
I think Chrystia forgets that she was a deputy prime minister while all this was going on.
I mean, it is a little bit wearisome, isn't it, to hear somebody speak like that when you've been following her career for the last 10 years and you know who she is and what she stands for and the policies that she's supported. I mean, she can get away with that with an ignorant American and an audience full of ignorant Americans that don't know about Canada and don't care about Canada. She can't get away with that in Canada, though. And I just, maybe that's why she's down there in the US chatting to a lot of Americans. But I mean, just there's another podcast, another interview with non-Canadians that she's done, which is with The Rest is Politics podcast in the UK. And when she was on there, she was made a similar sort of point. But in that same interview, you know, she just said there about we lose when we talk about identity politics. In that same interview, she started talking about how great women are and how, like, you know, the leader of Denmark is a strong woman and I'm going to be a strong woman. It's like, that's just identity politics too. She's kind of like talking out of both sides of her mouth. And if anybody cares to listen, it's not difficult to see that, you know, that she's trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, the other thing is, like, she was the one during her tenure as deputy prime minister and finance minister scolding Canadians and even telling them that, you know, when they complained about the economy, that it was just a vibe and that, you know, like maybe Canadians should just, she said a couple of things. She said that Canadians should just review their credit card statements and cut Disney and that'll help them. And the one that I found that was even more telling was when she said, you know, when somebody asked about the carbon tax, the compounding carbon tax, and she said, I don't know why people even complain. I don't even have a car, and I take the bus and the subway and all that, and I'm not sure why people need a car. That really doesn't really explain the fact that she gets a chauffeur-driven limousine that tours her around based on paid by the government, and also, you know, she has this high-paying job, and she lives in one of the most populated centers in Canada, where a lot of Canadians live in, you know, smaller communities where they definitely need a car just to get to the grocery store.
Yeah, I mean, she's had more than her fair share of gaffes, hasn't she, over the years? And, you know, it's my opinion that I really don't think she's a particularly good politician. I don't think that she's suited to politics. And she's just not a natural. I mean, just this morning she was walking around in Hamilton, like, you know, sort of industrial center in Ontario, with a load of men in like hard hats, and she just looked ridiculous. I'm sorry to say, she just looked so absurd, and she can't really speak a sentence in a political context without bluffing her lines a bit, I think. And the unfortunate thing is that she obviously has quite a lot of insight. I feel like she probably would have been a much better like civil servant or something, because she has, you know, she speaks several languages. She's lived in Moscow. She knows an awful lot about she knows a lot about a lot. You know, she's from a farming family in northern Alberta, so she knows about agriculture. She knows about the history of Russia. She speaks Russian, speaks Ukrainian. She obviously has a lot of assets. But with Chrystia Freeland, I almost feel like she's wasting her time in politics, to be honest. It's not, I don't think it's for her. I know that's kind of funny when she's been an MP for so long and a finance minister, but I just don't think it's for her.
If you watch that clip and the next clip here, it basically says that she must be saying she was bullied because, you know, she did have the responsibility as deputy prime minister and had a voice that was responsible to Canadians, but she's saying that she didn't agree with this stuff. She was just along for the ride, if that's what she's saying. Because the main platform of the Liberals for the past 10 years has been about climate change and all the policies that are kind of built around it. Let's listen to this next clip here.
I think it was last week, Ottawa I see is trying to pass a law limiting the amount of time you can idle your car. Now, I've been in Canada in the winter. It's pretty fucking cold out there.
That's why we used to have snowbirds before we decided we didn't want to spend our money in the United States.
And I don't think this, I mean, the reasoning is it's going to put a dent in global warming. I don't think it is. That you can only idle your car for a minute, I think remotely in 3 minutes if you're in it before you can get going to warm it up. This just pisses people off. And it looks like, as in America, they still haven't gotten the memo that this shit don't work. So you're against that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
look, Bill, I have got the menu. I have received the memo, to be a polite Canadian. I have received the memo, sir.
Yes.
And, you know, politicians win when they listen to people sincerely and hear what people are saying to them about their lives. And politicians lose when we think we are smarter than the people we work for. And when we think our job is to lecture people. That's not how democracy works.
People don't like bossy and they don't like snobs.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm always trying to tell the left. Okay.
I think she should go back and play some of her speeches over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Like
She
that's
seems
tough
to have had a Damascene conversion.
That's tough to listen to. And if you still go to her website, like her election website, climate change is still like the #1 pillar on there. So now when she's on Bill Maher looking for applause, she is all in on Bill Maher and saying that she got the menu or the memo. It's about chasing applause is what it's really about for Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, right? Whatever it takes to, like she's now listening to Canadians. Where were you listening for the past 10 years?
Well, I mean, you have to bear in mind that the government that she was a central part of for the last, best part of a decade was famous for being particularly rigid. That's why Justin Trudeau is about to step down as prime minister in the next few days, because it was so rigid and it refused to back down on, most obviously the carbon tax, but that's just the beginning. Bill C-18 is another one where they obviously lost. They decided to declare war on one of the biggest companies in the world, most obviously the carbon tax, but that's. Are we in business there? What was that? I could hear myself.
It's kind of somehow looped over yourself there.
Wow, maybe I'm like doing one of those live shows and I've got one of those pedals, loop pedal.
Chrystia Freeland's hearing when you're talking about her and she's just pressed the pause button on you.
Yeah, well,
she listens, right?
She's been a listener for a while, hasn't she? She's probably our most loyal listener, actually. But yeah, I can't even remember what I was saying because of that interjection. So I'll let you take over the reins.
Let's just move on to the Mark Carney. They've been accused now of his organizers of shielding Mark Carney from the media or just having certain media cover him, right? They send out invitations and you have to RSVP back to get location details. We've seen the same thing here when Justin Trudeau came here too. They wouldn't give us the location of where Justin Trudeau was. We had to find out from a city councillor, and then they told us where it was so that we could actually get there so we could ask a question. And we asked the question on Bill C-18. Carney, just like Justin Trudeau, wants to control access of the media to him, make sure that he only gets friendly media, I take it?
It's one of those interesting kind of paradoxes of modern Canadian politics, is that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, but particularly Pierre Poilievre, has this reputation for being like anti-press and like really aggressive and almost Trump-like in his sort of contempt for the press. And yet his press conferences are a lot more open than anything that the Liberals put on. The Liberals guard their press conferences like she lions guarding her cubs. They're very, very defensive, and there's been a lot of instances where they've kicked out people like, from Rebel.
Western
Obviously
Standard.
they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
yeah,
His
Western
first press
Standard. I
conference, he
mean,
kicked out 3 journalists.
yeah, this has been happening for a long time, and the thing is, Pierre Poilievre, whatever else you might say about him, is not afraid of the press. He does answer questions from the CBC, which is, we might as well speak plainly, an enemy of his. He looks at them as an enemy, and yet he lets them come to his press conferences and he lets them ask questions. Whereas the Liberals, they have enemies like the Western Standard and so on, but they don't let them ask questions. They don't even look at them as journalists. Whereas, Pierre Poilievre has massive amounts of contempt for the Canadian press and for the CBC and so on. But he's never said, "You're not journalists, get out of here." And he's never once refused to give them the address at which he's speaking and so on. That's something that the Liberals do. But it's one of these weird paradoxes, isn't it? Where it's kind of like, I've said that, we're on the inside and we know this. We do this for a living. We know all about this. It's obvious, and most journalists would probably agree with us, I would say. And yet, when you look to the public, the perception that the Conservatives are anti-media has stuck, I think, and that the Liberals are like, we protect freedom of inquiry and we protect the free press. It's actually not really like that. It's just about the other way around, actually.
Yeah. And if you look to the United States, it's the same thing there. It's the same playbook, the Democrats and the Liberals. I mean, during the press conferences or during the Biden administration, hardly ever was Joe Biden answering questions or given access, and rarely ever went to the podium. The thing about Trump and maybe his narcissism is that he goes to the podium 3-4 times a day, but he doesn't block out any press. He actually allows more press in. And it's the same thing here in Canada. Pierre Poilievre still allows the questions and answers questions, whereas we've seen with Justin Trudeau, and we were told once when he came here that we were allowed in the room and we're allowed to only take photos, not to dare ask a question. We'd never be allowed back in. And the second time that he was here, how many times did you reach out to get the address? 6, 7 times, phone calls, emails?
It was 7, yeah, if you include phone calls, probably, yeah.
And the same thing goes for Bill C-18. Like it's obvious if you do a little bit of homework, you'll see that independent media in Canada is being crippled and choked off while they continue to fund and now say they want to double the funding for the public broadcaster here that is definitely biased towards the Liberal Party. And I guess they should be, because they're the ones that they count on their paychecks from them, and Pierre Poilievre's government would defund them. So it actually puts them in a precarious position.
Yeah, indeed. But I mean, I would say the Liberals are guilty of they're guilty of saying one thing and doing another. Basically, is what I would accuse them of. But I would say the Conservatives as well aren't exactly model citizens in this regard either. Like I do wonder at the wisdom of Pierre Poilievre's attacks on the media. I mean, there's a calmer and more polite way to express your frustrations about the media, I think. But that's neither here nor there. But it's he speaks, he talks the talk, Poilievre, and he does it quite crudely and aggressively insults members of the media at his press conferences. But the point, I suppose, that should be made is at least they're there, they're in the room, and they're asking him a question. But the same is not true for the Liberals, because they don't even let them in the room.
Yeah, and I guess there's a comment here. One of the things that is a truth, though, is government should not be deciding who is and who is not media. That in itself is a problem.
Yeah, it's and as Holly Dawn, the sort of head honcho at Blacklocks, as she said, I mean, how is some ludicrous little pipsqueak in the CRA or something like that, like some civil servant, how in God's name are they in a position to even think that they can decide whether somebody like Holly Dawn is a journalist or not? Holly Dawn, who's been working in the press for about 30 years, who on earth do they think they are? And that was her. Like, she was just, that was the first time you interviewed her, wasn't it? Quite a while ago. You could see that she was just dripping with contempt at the very idea. So she didn't even, like, Blacklocks didn't even submit an application. They have nothing but contempt for those people.
There's a hot mic out there right now that Holly Doan has on her X account there from the Bank of Canada that says we want to make sure that we don't let in the likes of Blacklock's reporters into these press conferences because we don't answer those questions.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I would be very interested in seeing an intelligent Liberal Party supporter defend that. Not just some, not just some clown on Twitter who writes garbage, but an actual, real, thoughtful Liberal Party supporter. I would really like to see them defend that because it's quite difficult to defend it. Like even if I try and think, as I sit here, try and put myself in their shoes, very, very hard one to defend.
Well, we have to. The question that needs to be asked is what countries actually block media outlets and decide who is a media outlet and who isn't a media outlet. And you're going to find those countries are behind what you call, like communism or authoritarian governments. Those are the ones, like Russia, decides who's media, who isn't media. Free press in the United States is definitely, they don't block that. But here in Canada, we're deciding who is and who isn't by funding a select few and crippling the others with Bill C-18.
Yeah, it's Banana Republic territory, and that's been said, by commentators and people who are watching this, that it is kind of like a Banana Republic, isn't it? It's what you would expect from a Banana Republic.
And then Mark Carney in that lie that's, like if this would have been the other way around, the CBC would not let up on this. And he's actually caught here trying to answer why the accusation. He answers to the accusation here, and let's going to play this here.
Well, look, there's several elements to the transaction, Nora, and I should have been more precise in my answer. There's an overall move with a plan of arrangement, and the plan of arrangement and the agreement of all that, which is also true. It's complicated. The corporation and the company which happened after us was. I think the core, though, is what are we actually talking about? We're talking about the technical change to where the head office is. No difference to any employment. The technical change, no difference to any employment here in Canada. No difference to any of the operations here in Canada. And in fact, on net, what the technical change does is improves the access to capital.
It makes it look like you're trying to distance yourself from moving a headquarters from Canada to the United States. Why would you?
It's a technical, as I say, it's a technical change that enhances the liquidity. Brookfield is a great Canadian company. It's a great Canadian success story. If you look at the company still listed on Toronto, the employees all still here. I would say a number of the employees actually live here in Oakville, and having greater access to capital is a good thing for Canada, a good thing for Canadian growth.
You've been accused of lying. Did you lie, sir? You said you should have been more precise.
But there's multiple aspects. Okay, sometimes I answer questions that go into details when I should keep it at a higher level. That's part of the problem with not being a politician.
Part of the problems of being a politician is not answering truthfully. Is that what it is? Is that how it works?
Well, he's trying to say, yeah, that he should lie. That he's such a true guy, truth-speaking hero that he needs to be more like the slime bag politicians.
But he did lie, and then
that was cringe-inducing for many reasons. The other thing that I thought was bad about that was how he, well, number one, how when the question got difficult, he just walked away. That's showing absolute contempt for the Canadian people and for the free press. I mean, obviously, anybody should be able to see that. But I think one of the worst things is where he tried to sort of, in one of his answers, he tried to basically say, "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm the mega boffin giga brain. I'm the one that understands this." When he said it was a technical thing, we needed liquidity. It's like, okay, what are you talking about?
So if it was just
answer the question.
So if it was just a technical thing, why lie in the first place?
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing. It's about whether or not he told the truth the other day. Remember, this isn't like ancient history. This is like last week, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, I just find it funny. It's often when you corner somebody, and you've kind of got somebody, and you have, they and they know you've got them, they resort to, 5-syllable words, and they mumble about something that it sounds a bit obscure, a bit sort of abstruse. They're trying to say things to give you the impression that no, you don't really know what you're talking about. This is like we're talking about liquidity here, Jim. Liquidity. Do you know what liquidity is? No, I didn't
Yeah.
think so.
Oh yeah. No,
You
it's
weren't a
it's
central banker.
yeah. So yeah, you try to talk dumb people. And notice who's riding shotgun there with him though. She's been like right at his side there. Anita Anand, after announcing she wasn't going to run, is now running, and then seems to be riding shotgun with Mark Carney in the last little while here at the same time.
Got to admire her bravery, though, haven't you? She announced that she was stepping down when the Liberals were 25 points behind the Tories in the polls, and then very bravely and courageously, she's decided to come back now that they're even Stevens. So
Hmm.
again, we need more of that kind of valor in politics, I think.
Yeah. And then this is Andrew Scheer's comment on X. It said that Mark Carney asked ChatGPT to come up with that response when he got caught lying without actually admitting he got caught lying. I mean, don't forget, the Liberals and CBC went after Christy Clark when she was caught in a lie and did not let up till she dropped out. And here's, I would say, even in a worse, more consequential lie. And it seems like they're also riding like protection as opposed to going after him for this.
Yeah, I think it's considerably worse. The fact that Christy Clark was, joined the Tory party so that she could vote for her chum, and in the process try and have a weaker candidate elected to the party, to the Conservative Party. I mean, is that such a big deal? Like, I mean, obviously it was
It
a
was
bit
the
of a
lie that
scandal,
got her,
but
right?
it
It
doesn't
was,
really
yeah.
compare. Yeah, in the lie, but as an issue, it doesn't really compare to, what might as well be Canada's like just about anyway, Canada's like shiniest business jewel, Brookfield Asset Management, like a real like diamond in the Canadian economy. I think that's a bigger deal that Mark Carney was involved. We don't know the extent to which in moving their headquarters from Canada to New York City. I mean, that's a bigger deal than
Yeah.
Christy Clark voting for a chum in the Conservative Party for the leadership and then pretending that she didn't.
And then just, like when you enter into a relationship with anything or anybody, and this is what we're entering into, he wants to be Canada's leader. So that's a relationship with him and all Canadians. And if you start off with not just one lie, but several lies, even when he got caught talking about pipelines, it said one message to Western Canada and another message to Eastern Canada on pipelines. So which is it?
Yeah, and he's also under the light bulb a little bit with having tried to present himself as being completely outside of the political realm and not associated with the Trudeau government, when in reality he's been an advisor in one shape or another for several years, directly to the head man, directly to Justin Trudeau. He's had at least two advisor roles for the Liberal Party, so he has been involved in politics. I mean, politics is full of these people, these hangers-on. Just go to Ottawa or Washington, D.C. or whatever. These cities are absolutely packed with people who are called advisors. They're all politicians, basically. They're all in politics. The idea that you could be an advisor to a government and not be in politics, that's absurd to me. So quite obviously, Mark Carney is trying to present himself as having been, this like completely outside of politics, completely clean of the filth of politics. But in
Except when it
reality,
works.
he's right involved there. He's elbow deep.
Except when it works for him, because like when he wants to take credit. This is Stephen Harper coming on, said, and slams Carney for taking credit for Flaherty's work. And Stephen Harper writes, I've listened with increasing disbelief to Mark Carney's attempt to take credit for things they had little or nothing to do with back then. He has been doing this at the expense of the late Jim Flaherty, one of the greatest finance ministers in Canada. It's just, it's that next slide there. It's odd that he'll take credit for things, but when it comes to the negativity, they're saying the economy is bad. Oh, he didn't, Trudeau didn't listen to his advice. Then what was Trudeau, why would he be an economic advisor for that long if he wasn't listening? Doesn't make any sense. A lot of the stuff does not make sense.
But yeah, I mean, this is a valid point. I can't believe it's taken this long for somebody to state the obvious, which is that Mark Carney has claimed responsibility for Canada's relatively smooth experience during the financial crash when he was a central banker, but he's completely failed to acknowledge that the reason that Canada got through that a little bit, you know, less hurt than other countries is because of the regulatory
Yeah, it was
arrangements,
the banking.
the
Yeah.
very strict rules on
Yeah.
the ratio of capital to, you know, money that you can borrow or money
And
that
if
you
you
can lend for banks, and that's done by politicians. That was nothing to do with Mark Carney.
And we had Jean Chrétien here speaking at our Level Up convention. He took credit for that. And don't forget, at that time, Mark Carney was working for the Conservatives. So Jean Chrétien took credit for that regulatory environment for the banking industries, because we only have like a few major banks. I think it's 5. And it's not like the US where it's more loose than that. So him taking credit for that, but not wanting to take credit for this current economic situation when he was actually listed as the advisor here.
Yeah. And then also, the way he tends to sell himself is, I've been a central banker in 2 countries, and I got 2 countries through 2 different crises. So we've already discussed there the financial crash when he was Bank of Canada governor, but when he was Bank of England governor, he's referring to Brexit there when he's talking about a crisis. He is, and even before Brexit, he is generally considered to have been basically, like, in the best case, the best assessment I've heard is that he was basically like, he basically did nothing. He was basically neutral, both good and bad. But if you listen to a lot of people in England, and I'm not talking about his political opponents, let's say, I'm talking about actual sort of macroeconomists and that kind of thing, they look at him as actually having been a failure overall, a sort of mild failure, in that he pumped the asset bubble in England, which continues to this day to destroy the British economy and the quality of life of British citizens. So it doesn't, unfortunately, doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, because in the one case where he actually is respected universally around the world, that is when he was Bank of Canada governor, he's kind of overstating it a little bit, because obviously the regulatory and the fiscal and all that stuff wasn't his job. He didn't have anything to do with that. So he's overstating it there, and then with Brexit and in the UK, he's just not really telling the truth, unfortunately.
Brian Lilly with a tweet saying that we can expect an election on April 22nd. He's hearing that Mark Carney will call the election on March 16th with voting just after Easter. So, I mean, I think that seems to make sense. Mark Carney is riding high in the polls, and I think that's their opportunity. And I think he's going to want an election, because even if when he wins this Liberal leadership election that'll happen here on March 9th, I mean, there's not even a close second. It looks like he's going to easily win that. He becomes the prime minister without ever getting one single vote from a Canadian. And then, but he doesn't get to go into Parliament until he gets elected as an MP.
Yeah, I would say I'm sure there's a handful of Canadians still in the Liberal Party, so I guess he would say some Canadians have voted for him,
Yeah.
but not in a real election, not in an actual proper democratic election.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I think he is. I think this is correct. I do think he's gonna have to go quickly, because you can just imagine how rapidly it would sour if he hung on as prime minister, and he was literally, the House of Commons was open for business, and he was up there in the visitors gallery looking down like a sort of eunuch, like a totally powerless observer in the background. That's not a good look. There's no way that's tolerable. So yeah, they're gonna have to have an election.
There was another clip that I didn't put in because I thought we were just too many clips. Mark Carney speaking at this pub again, saying that basically that he is Winston Churchill and that the moment is 1938, and that he's really good in a time of crisis, but he's no good. He says this himself. He's no good when times are good. So does that mean he's going to keep us in crisis so he'll be good?
He needs to play to his strengths.
And then you're familiar with Winston Churchill. Is he Winston Churchill?
I wonder if he would genuinely, like, if you really grilled him on that, if he would stick to it and say that he was. I mean, I don't see many similarities between the two of them, really. I mean, do you think Mark Carney could escape from a prison and then write best-selling articles about it? And do you think Mark Carney would think Mark Carney would be a minister in a massive war, make a mistake, and then while still an MP, sign up to the military and go and fight on the front lines in the First World War? I'm not sure Mark Carney would do that.
No,
No.
I would disagree for sure. But also, one of the things that the Liberal Party has been really good at, and it's really effective for them, is driving fear. And they do this over and over again. To say this is a 1938 moment where we're starting the Second World War, comparing this to coming into Canada to be the Prime Minister in like economic turmoil, is a lot different than saying we're going to a world war, one of the worst wars of this planet's history. I just think that is just driving a bunch of fear. And they do the same thing when anybody makes points on, like even right now, we're making points on some of the things that the Liberal Party has done for a while. And then the next thing they do is they call you a Trumpian or something like that.
Yeah, I mean these constant like Second World War, 1930s analogies. I think this was ridiculous in like the 1960s. That's how old and boring this is. To think that this is still happening in the 2020s, the middle of the 2020s,
And who's
and we're
buying
still
into
having
it?
people compare. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of it's for people that don't know anything.
I think it's insulting to the soldiers that went off to fight in this war to say that this moment is the same. Like, and David Eby's used that too, that we're at war. This rhetoric has to be dialed down. They're only making it worse and making some Canadians that are susceptible to this, like you're basically not helping their mental wellness.
Certainly not these 4-year-olds that Chrystia Freeland keeps talking to
Yeah,
the US invading Canada.
yeah, and then the U.S. is invading Canada, and she's speaking to a 4-year-old like this, and then talking about nuclear weapons, that Canada's got to get nuclear weapons. What is really the matter with the Liberal Party? These two candidates that are running and talking about tanks rolling into Canada and nuclear weapons, and this is a 1938 moment. This type of rhetoric should be called out. If we had a free and independent media that was not biased by government handouts, they would definitely not survive the test of that.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. But with the World War II analogies, though, maybe that's an indictment of the sort of level of historical knowledge in the country, maybe, or at least what they think of as the level of what the politicians think the average Canadian has in terms of historical knowledge. Because this, even like, because they often they're saying that this is related somehow to Vladimir Putin. Putin's Hitler, Russia is Nazi Germany kind of thing. Like anybody that's even read like a brief introduction to sort of thing, one of those tiny thin little books about a historical event, they would know that that's nonsense. There really aren't any analogies there. There aren't very many comparisons at all to make. I mean, we haven't got all day, but just quickly to say, Nazi Germany in the late 1930s and early 1940s had pretty much the most powerful land military on earth. It had a gigantic economy, a fairly large navy. It had one of the best air forces in the world, and had proven that it could invade, annex, and defeat other countries pretty quickly. Like in the case of, Poland, France, really, really quickly. How does that compare to Russia? Russia has like a completely ramshackle economy, a really garbage military that can't even win in Ukraine. It's shown how ineffective it is because here we are 3 years later and Russian soldiers are still being slaughtered in eastern Ukraine. Where is the comparison? Russia is, I mean, it doesn't take very long, does it, to like smash that to pieces? And yet here we are, it's still apparently that they're still the Nazis. But I mean, what can you do?
Yeah, we got to go quickly for the rest of this stuff, I guess. We're up on our hour here. We got quite a bit of good stuff left, though. Donald Trump puts out a tweet on Truth, or whatever they call it on Truth, a Truth. Tomorrow night will be big, and I will tell it like it is. Brian Lilliput, I don't like the sound of this. So there's something going on. Who knows?
Well, it's very ominous because tomorrow is the tariff deadline.
Tariff
so
day too.
That suggests that he's for real this time, doesn't it?
And then more sadness in Germany there, another terror attack there where a car drives into a crowd in the German city of Mannheim. I've been to Mannheim.
It's just, I mean, can you even remember the last sort of 10 of these? They're all the same. It just keeps happening in Germany. It keeps happening. The same thing keeps happening again and again and again. It's this is an absolute like full-blown crisis. There's like a low-level war going on in Germany, but they don't really have any interest in acknowledging it as such.
And Canada's rock star on his famous last tour, Justin Trudeau, heading home from London after visiting King Charles. And he was at the European Security Summit.
Yeah, look at those lovely Queen Anne chairs or whatever they are. Very, very nice. Very nice upholstery.
There you go. Some people would probably put those out in a garage sale, but they're probably worth a lot, right?
Yeah, they are now. Now that the scented Justin Trudeau has sat on one of them, I mean, big time.
Yeah, on Sunday, Trudeau said Vladimir Putin is a liar and a criminal and cannot be trusted to keep his word in any way, shape, or form. And according to Chrystia Freeland, you might be in that same boat. So there you go. And then we already talked about this. Canada waiting to see if Trump starts the tariffs, and that's supposed to start tomorrow, actually. So, and then CBS News has confirmed that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered the U.S. Cyber Command to temporarily halt cyber operations and plan against Russia. So, not sure what that means. I did see on a Fox News headline that the Zelensky deal is back on the table. So. I mean, you can't keep up with that stuff down there. You never know what's happening in the next 5 minutes there. Definitely, if anything, he keeps the media outlets active in the United States, if nothing else, right?
Yeah, very very busy work, isn't it? This thing though with the Russians, the question that should immediately spring to mind is why exactly were they carrying out cyber offensives against Russia, a country that for all the bad relations, they aren't at war with,
Right.
But I mean, I think the real reason is it was retaliatory because the Russians do this in the West all the time. But if this is if it's a possibility that those cyber attacks can be stopped from Russia, that would be brilliant because they steal hundreds of millions of dollars like every year from hospitals and businesses and all sorts.
Yeah. It's ongoing. An Australian whose blood saved 2.4 million babies has died at the age of 88. Aussie hero James Harrison, whose blood contains a rare antibody, died in his sleep. Can
you imagine that? I mean, we're talking about all these people who think that they're great. We're talking about people like Chrystia Freeland, Vladimir Putin, blah blah blah. All these people. They all probably deep down think they're great people. But then look at this chap. I mean, they are not fit to polish his fingernail, are they? This guy really is a hero. This is an extraordinarily consequential human being, far more than Vladimir Putin or any of these cretins.
Absolutely. Let's move on to markets. Gold up this morning and up pretty good, up like $30. And Canadian dollars even higher, 41.67 in Canadian dollars. Crypto has bounced a little bit. You can kind of see in the chart for the Bitcoin there, for the Bitcoin. It touched down quite low there and then has bounced back solidly. So interesting to see where Bitcoin goes. Of course, the negative talk out there now is saying that the Bitcoin thing may not be real. That's how the news cycle works. Like they came out there and says maybe it's not going to be a U.S. reserve asset. And so you get the negative stories. It pounds it down almost to 80, like to fill that gap. And then there's quite a resounding bounce off that $80,000 mark rate. So for the people buying the dip there. Canadian dollar, not looking that good here as it awaits the tariffs. We did that really good story with the UBCO prof there and says, the tariffs for most people won't cause, the people that will lose their jobs is one part of it, but the consumer is the one that will get affected in the retaliatory tariffs. And he was saying that maybe Canada should pump its brakes be cautious on retaliatory ones, because that's the ones that will hurt Canadian consumers. It's on the goods that are coming this way. The tariffs going the other way that they're going to charge us actually hurts the American consumer, not the Canadian consumer. So keep that in mind. when you're talking
This is
tariffs.
interesting though. You've got the 10-year one on here, haven't you?
Yeah.
Look at the right at the beginning there, that dip. That's the election of Justin Trudeau, isn't it? October 2015. So interesting that that was his beginning and this is his end. Doesn't look good for Justin.
The dollar was actually, during Harper's tenure, was actually over a dollar. I think $1.10 was the high during Harper's tenure. Although it did have some low points too, but I think the lowest was 89 cents or something like that, right? So
Well, there's Harper there, 84 cent, 84. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
near the
rounding up, 84.
Yeah, that's near the end of his tenure, but yeah, during the beginning part of it was actually higher. So, in the AI and tech world, Google demands a 60-hour work week. You know, those people that want to have more work-life balance. Google says no, get to work and work in the office to top it off, because Google definitely playing catch up in the AI world, and they're saying they want their engineers at work, working harder. Because they've obviously fallen behind. Their first launch of Gemini was kind of a joke, right? And they really are quite a bit behind it. With all that money, with all those engineers, I guess sometimes it's hard to make the jump when the hungry ones like OpenAI and Grok and these other ones and Claude are making huge headway, and Google maybe has too much cash money.
Well, they give like kids fresh out of university sometimes off, like you read about it quite a lot when you look at Google salaries. They give these youngsters who know nothing like $200,000 a year. Do they honestly think that that entitles them to an easy life where they can work from home for like 30 hours a week or something? I mean, you're being paid more than basically everybody on the planet. So you should, but they don't seem to feel that way. I think they're quite entitled, aren't they? They seem to think that they deserve these massive salaries to do nothing.
A lot
So
of
I can kind of
companies,
understand why Google would be putting the boot down a bit.
a lot of companies, including a lot of the big banks, including the U.S. government, now forcing people back to work. The federal government in Canada, we did that story just a couple of days ago, has a 3-day a week work at the office policy. But in December, only 31% of those people at the Department of Defense followed those rules.
Yeah, and they are kind of like our Google employees in a way, aren't they? In that they have very high salaries in the federal government. So that surely can't work forever.
And a new Alibaba now to make AI video creation free to the public. So this is coming fast and furious. So now here's Alibaba saying, because there's a lot of these AI gen models out there, and some creating videos, some creating photos and all that kind of stuff. And the stuff is getting, the advancements are, this is why we have this segment in here, because the advancements are fast and furious. I mean, I rarely use Google now. I mean, I just use basically ChatGPT and Grok. I find that Grok can actually search websites and stuff like that. Like, I was doing something with LinkedIn yesterday, and I asked it to kind of like review my article, and OpenAI said it can't access LinkedIn, but Grok says, sure, no problem.
Well, it's Google still has a use if you want to spend 45 minutes trying to find an answer to a pretty straightforward question.
Yeah.
Then Google's for you.
I do find that the more you use it, the more comfortable you get with it, the more it gives you the straight up answers. It's what I really like with it. So, and then here you go, fitness trainers. There's a bunch of apps out there now that'll give you a fitness trainer, and you can upload your photos. You can do that with OpenAI as well. You can upload your photos. You can track your progress with OpenAI. I do it myself. You can ask it to tell you your body fat percentage. You can ask for exercises to work on certain parts of your body. You can do a ton of different things. And also, we'll chart your progress and evaluate your photos from 3 months ago to today and tell you what to do. And you can actually upload photos of food or packaging and say, should I eat this? And a lot of times it'll say things like, don't eat it, right? And it'll analyze the chemicals that are in food as well. And then this is the one where I'm talking about the photos, this next photo here. Where actually, if you upload your photo, it'll tell you your body fat percentage and your lean mass and all that stuff. So a couple of them out there, you can go check them out online yourself. Gym Buddy, Dr. Muscle, Fitbod. There's quite a few of them out there. But you can just use OpenAI and do a lot of that stuff yourself. because a lot of these are using those LLMs. Is they're just building an agent on top of a model like Claude or OpenAI or Grok. And in our EV world, we've got a video to play for you here. And listen closely to the video.
Of a city that's gone mostly electric. Really, the only thing you hear anymore is people honking their horns. And everybody with a scooter rides on the street with the pedestrians.
There you go. That's in Shenzhen, China. And that city is a super modern city, and it came out of nowhere too. They built a massive city that's mostly all electric, and Chinese EV sales are over 50% now electric.
It's a good way to get knocked over, though, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine so, right?
Probably want to invest in a giant bubble wrap suit or something, so that when you inevitably do get knocked over, you can survive it.
Yeah, and in our comedy section, in our meme for the day, there you go. There's a good Canadian there, Michael J. Fox.
We don't know whether or not he actually had one, do we? I mean, they're not 100% effective after all.
There you go, Michael J. Fox, and I can't remember the name of the other actor there. Escapes me.
Just call him Doc.
Doc, yeah.
That'll do.
Yeah, so Justin Trudeau is finishing up his world tour. How many days has he got left?
6, I guess.
6 days? 6 days. How many countries can he do in 6 days? How much money can he spend?
That's gonna be the reality TV show that nobody asked for.
How much money can he spend? I did see on I guess his son. There's a country star that's got a big following on TikTok, and he's got a song that's beating the charts out. And I guess he did a little rant on Justin Trudeau's son turning like going to become a rap artist. So
yeah, I mean, I do wonder. He has been very, very busy, hasn't he, Justin? So I do wonder what he's still got up his sleeve. I mean, we know that he loves BC, doesn't he? He always talks about how he loves BC. So I suspect he's gonna do something in BC. Maybe that'll be his final show.
Maybe he'll be our next premier.
Yes, maybe he'll be the next. Maybe he'll succeed Adrian Dix at the climate change ministry or whatever they call it now.
I believe if Mark Carney wins, he'll probably be made the climate ambassador for the world to represent Canada on the world stage as our climate ambassador. That's what I believe will happen. That way he can travel around, still get everything paid for, and get all the pomp and ceremony he needs.
Yeah, or maybe you can do climate change, Ukraine, and LGBT affairs. That could be you can have a triple responsibility. Wear 3 crowns at once.
Yeah, and we know that Chrystia Freeland listens, so maybe she'll pass on that idea to Mark Carney. There you go. I'm sure that one's probably the paperwork's already done for that. Mark Carney will forget that he did the paperwork, though. This is our joking segment, though. Keep that in mind.
I mean, Chrystia, even though Mark Carney's probably going to win, I can only imagine that his very, very good friend, Chrystia Freeland, is going to have a prominent position in the government, possibly finance minister again, but I don't know. But yeah, she's going to be in a position of power, I think, no matter what. Good old Chrystia.
According to
send us an email, Chrystia, if we're wrong, but I do think so. So she'll be able to veto Justin if he wants this glorious job.
According to Karina Gold, the other candidate for the Liberal Party, says they need to keep the team together. So no matter who wins, they're all on Team Liberal. So there you go. So when you're voting, remember the last 10 years is the same group of people that are going to give you the next 4 years.
Look, if you've got a team as good as that, you don't want to break them up, do you? It's like it's sacrilege almost. That's why so many people were upset when the Beatles broke up. You just don't break up people that work so well together. So yeah. Keeping
in mind, this is our comedy section. So beautiful day in the Okanagan. There you go. If you see the live shot, traffic flowing in down Highway 97. And look at that sky here, and there's no snow on the ground in Kelowna. And meanwhile, in Ottawa, you should get a picture for us so we can put it up that tomorrow. Let's do that from now on. We'll put up a picture of Ottawa and compare it to what's going on in Kelowna. How's that sound?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be depressed,
you just take a picture. You walk outside and take a picture of the snowbank, send it in.
yeah. All right.
All right. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now. We ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, because it definitely helps us. We did a really good story the other day on supporting Canadian businesses. It's done really well. It's got over 150,000 views. We're going to do another one today on the tariff stuff. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on TikTok. We're also on X. And we do have an alternative Facebook and Instagram page until they find it and shut that off too. But we also have a newsletter that goes out 365 days a year before 7 a.m. You can sign up for that too. And also visit the website on an ongoing basis. Canada's one of the few independent local media outlets left in Canada that is gets zero funding from the government and is being crippled and hobbled by Bill C-18. So there you go. We do thank you. We fight on another day. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.